Welcome to a catalogue of conversations with friends, where we try to explore the complexities of life as we know it. I'm your host and your girl T, and this is Tea Time. Hello and welcome back. This is episode 3 of Tea Time with your girl T. As you can tell, if you're watching the YouTube video, I have another guest. It's my second guest on the potty, which is very exciting. I'll get my guest to introduce himself in just 1 second, but as you can see by the attire, the
blankets,
the decorations, it is
decor.
Winter right now. The time is slipping through my fingers like sand, so this is the winter edition of the podcast. But yes, our guest today is Jeff. Please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm Jeff. It's actually really hard to introduce yourself because I'm used to introducing myself in a LinkedIn context. We've known each other probably since uni.
Yeah,
I think you were maybe one of my first friends I made because we met before uni even started at science camp.
Yeah,
and I think we've been friends ever since.
Yes.
I obviously really enjoyed talking to you. I'm really glad and grateful to be able to be a part of this podcast. And hopefully we'll be able to share, I think, probably not advice, but definitely experiences. I think it'd be just nice to share some stories, share some experiences, and, if you're really interested in hearing us out.
Yes. And if you've seen my other vlogs recently, that's where Jeff made his debut. So you would have seen him. Yeah. For the first time. Jeff is a super stand-up guy. Obviously, like he said, we've known each other for a while. My opinion is that he's super, super great.
Again, other people's opinions may differ, so your opinions may also differ after this podcast. So leave
it in the comments. Yeah, without further ado, we've got our tea. We're going to jump into it. Okay, so I thought we'll start with an easy question. Mm-hmm. Pretty general, but we'll get into it from there.
Yeah.
Obviously, for context, Jeff and I have both been in serious relationships before. I'm currently in a serious relationship, and you've been in one or two. So we have, quote-unquote, experience.
Yeah. Big quote-unquote.
Quote-unquote. That being said, I feel like, at least speaking for me, I'm a very, what do they call it in science? Applied versus theoretical?
Yeah.
I'm a very, theoretical type of scientist when it comes to relationships and stuff, because obviously I only have the one relationship to apply it to. Not that I think I'm doing a bad job, but a lot of the things that I will speak on are things that I've theorized about. So if you come to me with this problem, I can talk to you about it, and I hopefully will give you good advice, but it's not like I've been through the exact situation. I think that's where I'm coming from.
And I guess you kind of empathize and resonate using your own experiences, right? But it's not the exact same thing.
That's therapy speaking, right? Look at those big words.
Big resonate, empathize.
When was the last time a man said the word empathize? So I was going to start with, in relationships, in your opinion, what do you think is the most important thing for it to be a good relationship? In your opinion.
Ooh, okay.
For you, maybe.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. It's a big question as well. I think for me, it's probably, and I'll dive into this a bit more, I'll elaborate further, but the one word answer would be compatibility, right? And I think a lot of people will be communication or love or respect, and all those things are really, really important, right? But I think compatibility can almost encapsulate a lot of those things. So, for example, you might have two couples, they have one particular communication style. Maybe they prefer to call once every 2 days, right? Yeah. You've got another couple who are no, we want to be chatting every single day. And I think a lot of times, at least at the current society, there's always this comparison. There is somehow this objective baseline of what is the perfect relationship and what is perfectly required and a perfect formula. Just from my perspective, I think actually just looking at my own previous relationship, looking at my friends' current and previous relationships, I think they're all quite different. And at least for me, when I'm approaching my next relationship, I'm not going to go, oh, that was how it worked last time. This is how it's going to work this time. It's more around, how do we mold to each other's needs? Communication is a large part of that. I think communication helps you understand each other and reach compatibility. But I think the almost North Star of it all are the two people compatible in their communication styles, in kind of what they want, in their values. So when I look at compatibility, it's almost like a cheat answer, right? Because you asked me what's the one thing, and I kind of gave an answer that basically said, well, everything aligning, right? But I think it's kind of looking at how two people interact and if they align. So I think that's really important. And maybe this is romantic. I'm romantic at heart, perhaps. But I think it's also based on a feeling as well. Yeah. Like you actually want to need to want to be there.
Yeah.
I think that's really important.
True.
Again, people always like revert to like compromise and communication, all those things. But I'm like, well, why are you communicating? Why do you want to compromise? Why do you want to work towards it? It's because you both want to be there.
Yeah.
It's because you both want the outcome.
Yeah.
And so you're all aligned on the goal. So I think that's also really, really important, right? Like both of you wanting it and wanting to make it work. And then I guess the baseline stuff is like, just don't be toxic, right? Like,
Don't be toxic.
like it's not a toxic relationship. You're not putting each other down. You're not like at each other's faces.
Yeah.
You're not constantly making each other feel unsafe.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like, I'm assuming that that's all there because
the bare minimum.
Yeah, the bare minimum. Because I think like beyond all those other things that make it work, like that's probably the most important thing. Like I'm talking to friends, if I'm way down the track, if it's like my children getting relationships, right? I'd be like, well, actually none of those other things matter. Like if they're not respecting you and you're not feeling safe, then you need to get yourself out of there.
I mean, I totally agree with like, I feel like I'm a big feelings person. And I think I need to, maybe it's intuition, maybe it's, gut feel and stuff, or maybe it's just the way things work out. But I try to like lean into that a little bit more. And I was talking to someone recently and they were asking me about my type. Like, you know how when you're young and you say like, oh, what's your type? And you say like, what's that thing where it's like 6 foot?
Yeah, like, yeah.
Works
like,
in finance.
Yeah.
And obviously it's like when you're younger, you have like a much shallower understanding of like your partner or like your ideal partner. But I was like to them, look, I can tell you what my type used to be when I was young and like shallow and didn't really think beyond like the reality of what being in a relationship means. But all I can really tell you like now, if you ask me about my type, it's not about like a type. I couldn't design my perfect partner. It's about like how you feel when you're with them.
Yeah.
It's about like, do I feel comfortable?
Yeah.
Do they feel like the right person?
Yeah.
Do I have good like
I completely agree with that. And I think it's almost to a certain extent where our types when we were younger is what we think we'd like. And what we imagine we'd enjoy. And I think that goes for a lot of things in life, right? Like you go into a particular career or you study a particular thing. And I remember like, in uni, right? When we were graduating, like, oh, like Big Four, I'm going to get a grad job. Like we think that's going to like, perfect our world, right? Like that everything's going to be great if we get into this one job and do that one thing. And then we actually go do it and we realize, hey, these jobs don't maybe fulfill us. It could be really fulfilling for some people, but maybe we realize as we go along, there's other important things that are involved. And I think we've gotten better at interpreting and understanding what's important for us. And I agree with you. It is the feeling. The part of our brain that's logical and the part of our brain that feels aren't necessarily the same part of the brain. So we can have all these logical checklists of like what should make us feel a particular way, but that's the logical part of our brain working. And then the part of the brain that actually feels doesn't really care about that checklist. And it'll just feel the way it feels because it feels that way. And I think like even on the working yourself part, right? It could be through therapy. It could be through other means. Like, I think like I gain a lot through sports. I'm like really into like trekking and mountaineering, right? And I've gained so much in that. Like when I was, sometimes I'm on those like 20-day treks, right? And
very sporty.
No, but like
good guy.
and I don't expect like my partners to go on my 20-day treks with me. Like it's just kind of like, a thing that I wanted to do when I was young. And I kind of did some of that earlier this year when I was traveling for a bit. And yeah, like you kind of gain a deep understanding as well because you've got your own space and you're really just exercising constantly. You're walking. It's amazing, beautiful scenery. And then you get to reflect a little bit. And I think touching on, it's like reflection, right? And I, weirdly enough, that 20-day trek in some ways gave me more than like 15 sessions of therapy. Not just a relationship, like a 15, and therapy is like super expensive. And so like, I think, it's about finding the thing that helps you understand yourself better.
Yes.
Be that therapy or some of the stuff or like a multitude of things. And I think it's like touching on that point around like insecurities or like your feelings. I think it can be really confusing sometimes because sometimes we might feel like we need to do a particular thing. And then sometimes we reflect in hindsight and we're like, oh, like, should I really have done that? For example, like if I'm having an argument and like you feel really angry at the moment, you feel like taking a particular action. And I think for me, I was chatting with a friend recently about this. I think it's less about just the feelings, but more about like learning to interpret those feelings. So
emotional regulation.
Yeah, like emotional regulation and I guess like interpreting emotions a bit better as well.
Yeah.
So if it's like, okay, like let's say right now we're about to do a podcast. I haven't done a podcast in a while, right? And this is probably the first podcast where there's video recording. Like I've done some podcasts before, but like
you're just like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So like I might feel a little nervous, right? And I went for like the sleep tea to like, make myself feel calmer. Like I might be feeling a little bit nervous. And then like, so it's about interpreting this emotion. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, why am I a bit nervous? Is it valid? It's really just drawing my attention to potential threats, I guess. And then realizing actually I'm with a good friend. It's a really safe space.
It's okay if you fail.
It's okay if I fail.
Re-record.
We can re-record. And I think like overall, I think your following is quite a supportive community, things like that. So I think it's less about just, acting based on your feelings, but then listening to your feelings and getting better at interpreting it. Because I think like emotions, it's almost like a completely different language.
Yeah.
And the better you are at interpreting what that emotion is trying to tell you, the better you can decide on what to do based on that emotion. And I think that's kind of like one of my biggest learnings, right? It's like, I think younger, it's like, I feel this way, therefore I act.
Yes.
Now it's like, I feel this way. Well, what's it trying to tell me? Is it trying to draw my attention to something?
Yes.
And I still kind of have that additional filter,
yes.
like almost like a prefrontal cortex filter of like, okay, well then what do I do based on this information rather than just like an immediate, let's respond.
Yes.
So it's less a reaction. It's more like a response actually.
Yeah.
So it's more processed.
That's really like one of the main skills that I had to develop as an adult. I'm probably exposing myself, but like I had a really not hard time. I just never knew it was a thing that people could do. I wasn't aware that you could have an emotional reaction to something and then choose to do something else. Like, for example, literally yesterday, I was having a conversation with someone and they were just really irking me. Like, when you're in a situation where you're just being graded on and you're like, I'm on my last straw. This person says one more thing. And we were texting, thankfully, so it wasn't like...
It wasn't like, your ears weren't getting red. You were like,
The conversation came to a point where it was basically like, look, I could decide to pick a fight at this point. But I like read their message and I started writing the reply that was like a little angry.
Like that was your reaction reply,
a little antagonistic.
Right? Like, yeah.
And then I kind of paused and I was like, backspace. And then I kind of just wrote like a very neutral wrap-up sentence.
You select all. Delete.
Yeah, actually.
Let me rewrite this.
I just ended up saying something that was like really neutral and just like ended the conversation there. Because I was like, look, first of all, why would I be arguing with this person? What does that gain me? Really nothing, right? It's just for you to like, I don't know, feel superior that you won an argument or something. Like that's why a lot of people have arguments for the sake of it.
Yeah.
And secondly, who is this person? Like I actually do care about this person. I have a good relationship with them. It's not really worth arguing over something that doesn't matter. And thirdly, at this point in the conversation, it's not going to go anywhere. Yeah. Like, I would be the only one dragging it on.
Yeah.
Like, really, what am I doing? What am I actually trying to do right now except, like, throw a tantrum for no reason?
And I think this almost links back to, like, our earlier conversation around, like, what's important in a relationship, which is, like, compatibility and alignment, right? Which is aligning goals. I think a lot of times... I think, that process that you went through, which is like, what are we going to achieve with this?
Yeah.
So if you and your partner have the same goal and what you want to achieve is to be understood and to understand them better and to just improve your relationship, then that is kind of your common goal. And you can kind of use that almost as your guiding light, your North Star, whatever you want to call it, right? Like that sense of guidance to then navigate your own emotions, right? So like, let's say you're feeling really angry and rather than reacting to it, it could be, well, what I want is for my partner to understand that this is a boundary of mine because your common goal is to work on the relationship. So then the anger, all that is an indicator to you that someone's crossed the boundary.
Yeah.
You can use that as an indicator to know that, well, what boundary's been crossed, but you don't need to use the anger to then convey that message to your partner.
Yeah.
All the anger is an indicator to you that a boundary has been crossed.
Yeah.
Then you find a way to regulate back down to like your baseline state and then you communicate. So anger was still really useful in this setting, right? It was useful in highlighting to you in a really strong way, like flashing signs, boundary crossed, right? But it's probably not useful in communicating that the boundary has been crossed.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I think that message, like feel your feelings and like accept them, it sometimes isn't nuanced enough, right? Because I think sometimes it can be misconstrued as, well, I should just react.
Yeah, that's true.
It's more in understanding, well, what usefulness does this emotion have for me?
Yeah.
Use it and then regulate it so that you go to another emotion to communicate.
Is this 15 sessions of therapy or the 20-day trek? You'll never know.
And I'll actually say it's about me the 20-day trek, to be honest. Like,
no, I totally agree. Like, to be fair, the question I asked at the start is probably the wrong question that I had in mind, because I said, like, what do you think is the most important thing in a relationship? When I think I meant, like, what was the most important thing you learned
in my
about a relationship?
About relationships,
like, that is important.
What's the most important lesson I can convey?
Yes,
right?
yes, exactly. Yeah. Because my answer to that was going to be communication. Like, obviously, I agree with everything you said about compatibility. Yeah. It is very all-encompassing. It's probably like a good, like you said, like, general direction, guide as an answer. What I was going to say about communication is, like, I learned a lot in my current relationship about how to communicate to someone in those stressful situations where you're, like, butting heads, right? But the whole, like, when you're having an argument, you never say you.
You say we.
Yes, but you never say you in the sense, like, you never say, you don't love me. You're doing this because...
You also shouldn't say we don't love me either. Like, don't...
We don't love me. No, but, like, you shouldn't accuse them of things that they are in control of. So if you say, like, you don't care about me, you don't care about what I say, whatever, like, it's easy for someone to react to a statement like that, because if you said that to me, I'd be like, what? You don't know anything about me.
Yeah. And it also sounds like an accusation.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
No, it is an accusation, basically.
Yeah.
But it's, like, so commonplace and normalized in relationships for someone to express their feelings in that way.
And it's stated as fact.
Yeah,
as well.
exactly.
And it means that the other person naturally would respond because they
that's
feel...
false.
Exactly.
And then you argue. But, like, what you should be doing instead, or what you can try, is you say I. So instead of saying, like, you don't care about me, you say, I feel, for example, like, neglected. Or I feel like we haven't been spending a lot of time together. I feel really left out. Like, saying these things, it's valid because it's your feelings.
Yeah, and I think beyond that, just helping the discussion, right?
Yeah.
It's also just a more accurate representation of the facts.
Yeah.
Right? Saying you don't love me is probably not really an accurate representation of the things that are going on. But saying I feel like, I feel neglected, or I feel like we don't spend enough time together. That is much more representative of the picture, because that's actually how you feel.
And that's more representative of the problem. Because the problem is not that you don't care about me, because that's not true, right? The problem is I feel this way and I don't want to feel this way anymore. And it's like, that turns it into us against a problem versus us against each other as the problem, right? And, like, that to me is probably the biggest learning, because I was really not good at communicating in that way, and we would have a lot of fights in that along those lines. And Jeff was actually really helpful. I went to him one time about an argument. He was like, well, you guys are on the same team. And I was like, oh.
Never thought of that.
Wait, I think you're correct. Let me go back and have another conversation. The crux of every argument is, do I care more about winning this argument, or do I care more about the person standing in front of me? And if you want to win an argument, go be a politician. Like, there's no space for that in a relationship that you want to work out, right? Like, who actually wins when you forcefully defeat them in an argument, right? I mean, like, you probably, your parents or someone that, are in a relationship like that, where it's literally like a debate team.
Yeah.
And no one wins.
Yeah. And I think that's probably, and this isn't just in romantic relationships, right? I think in friendships as well. And just in my day-to-day interactions, I think, like, just widening the discussion and broadening it out. I think I've started to notice and look at it in a way where, is this person trying to have a discussion with me where we're genuinely trying to share with each other, and they're trying to help me understand myself, or they're actually just trying to help understand me and my perspective and then share theirs? Or are they just trying to win and sound smart, for example? And this, again, not even just in romantic relationships. Sometimes it's at work. Sometimes it's with people that I know. It can really turn into a debate almost. And the tactics they almost use, it is almost like, oh, you never said... Or like, they'll use various tactics that just kind of try and shut you down. Yeah. Right? It's kind of one of those, like, I won, you just got shut down, almost like a very, like, internet argument, or like a, 12-year-old debate. And I think that there's not a lot of place for that, especially in really close and intimate relationships, where what you're really trying to do is perhaps share with each other. And then I think that type of discussion oftentimes makes it more difficult to be vulnerable, because you're really trying to express yourself.
You're on edge.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're just constantly making it more difficult, right? Sometimes. So
I mean, to be fair, when you're in, like, a really emotional place, especially, like, anger is such a volatile emotion that it kind of, like, blinds you. And it always sounds really cliche when you talk about it in a
situation like this.
We're calm, we're drinking tea, we're like,
you're
just
talking
chilling
about
out.
it as if it's like an incendiary bomb. But like when you're actually in the thick of it, people act in like the most silly goose ways, and they don't even mean to. Like when we were arguing, I think I was like trying to express my feelings. And then I said something along the lines of like, you decided. And he said, well, actually, you were the one that said. You were the one that said I didn't have to.
Yeah.
And then I said I didn't want to. And I was like,
it's like,
that's the hill you want to die
like,
on?
really?
Right? Real?
To be fair, like when emotions high, you die on the most random hills.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's not so much if that hill's worth it. It's more like that hill was the hill that broke the camel's back almost, right? Yeah.
And it's like at that point, you'll do anything to get a win. Like you're not looking at the bigger picture, right?
Yeah.
So like cut yourself some slack if you're like, holy shit, that's me.
Yeah,
like,
100%. Yeah.
But, now that you're aware of this kind of stuff, it's like, it makes such a big difference if you're able to catch yourself in the moment and choose.
Absolutely. And I think we're talking about it in this context because we've also been that person, and we still are. If that makes sense. So this absolutely isn't coming from a place of like, oh, we've grown, right? And even when we talk about therapy, it's not like, oh, I've gone to therapy, therefore I'm better. Like, and I think therapy is quite a complex thing as well. Like sometimes it works for some people, sometimes it doesn't. I've got a very mixed experience with therapy depending on the therapist I've been to and so on, and it's definitely not one of those cases where you go to therapy therefore you're better, or you've gone to therapy and you immediately become a better person. Like props for wanting to work on yourself, and I think everyone should want to do that. But I think one of my biggest learnings through therapy is that it's not as simple as I went to therapy, I'm now better.
I'm better.
Like,
you are never gonna be done.
And it's so much more complex than that. And sometimes there have been cases where you go to therapy and it actually might have become worse than if you hadn't gone to therapy for whatever reason. I think it's not just as simple as, oh, yeah, I want to be better, so all I got to do is I sign up for therapy, I attend these sessions, and then immediately I'm better. That's kind of not how it works. And it takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of perseverance. So many times you're like, you want to give up. And I think we're speaking about these things from a context of we constantly still fall into the exact same traps. And it's more, and hopefully it comes across this way, it's more from a place of like, hey, we do these things and we want to do them less.
And I mean, like, even if you go to therapy, you're not going to stop falling in the traps. It's not like you become enlightened and you visit this plane that's above all of this human mess. Like, even if you go to therapy, even if you've been in therapy for ages, even if you're like fixed or whatever, you're still human, and every human makes mistakes, and that's unavoidable. No amount of therapy or treks is gonna like fix you. You just have to live with the fact that there's gonna be flaws.
And I think it's to a certain extent where it's like almost like you shouldn't feel like you need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's not like you need fixing, right? It's maybe like just for me it's more like are there components I want to improve on, or are there things that like genuinely really bother me that I kind of want to work on? And I think like it's about like partly, depending on what you go to therapy for, right? It could be because you want relief from something that's really weighing on you, or it could be because you want to maximize another part of your life. There's many reasons people go to therapy, and then there's many reasons why people don't go to therapy. And from my perspective, you're not automatically avoidant if you choose not to go to therapy. Maybe you found better ways to cope with what you're coping with. And I think it's really important that you've reflected and you're trying to be as honest with yourself as possible, and you're looking at your progress and then deciding based on that what works and doesn't work for you. And
and I mean, like, we're not saying, or we're not sharing this stuff to say we're better or whatever,
because we're not.
Because we're not. No one really is better than anyone. But it's kind of like, I don't know about yourself, but I feel like I'm a much more cerebral, like intellectualizing kind of person. And so for me, it's easier to parse through all of this stuff, thinking through it. And I've been told I'm very reflective, I'm very mature. I'm very self-aware in a lot of these instances because of that. But for a lot of people, that's not who they naturally are. Like, they're not the type of person where this kind of realization or this kind of observation comes easily to them. And so really what people generally do when they're sharing stuff like this is they're saying, hey, if you didn't know this was a thing, this is your chance to find, oh, wait, you're totally right. I never thought about it that way, but that is a thing. And that hopefully will give you the tools to then go and make better choices, it doesn't have to be in therapy, but that's also essentially what therapy does. Is like gives you the tools to then go about your life and realize, hey, I haven't looked at this thing from this perspective before. What if I do it differently? Or, you know, like maybe this is a thing I need to change. And it's like you're sitting in the dark and someone like shines a torch on something. It might not be the right thing for you, but you now see one more thing than you did before. You don't have to listen to us. You can choose to take it and do whatever you want with it, but it's like hoping that putting this out there for the people that aren't aware or don't have access to this kind of information.
And sometimes it's just about sharing experiences, right? Like I think podcasts are really cool because you kind of get to almost have or like listen in on a conversation that you probably wouldn't have been listening to anyway, and we get to share a conversation with people that wouldn't be able to share in other circumstances.
Exactly.
It's kind of almost like, you know how like sometimes like after a ski trip or after like something,
like
you sit around a fire and you've got like 10 friends and you're DNMing, and then we almost get to DNM with like a bigger group of people. And I think that's the cool thing about it. And when you're DNMing, it's not ever like, oh, I'm more right than you, therefore I share this, or your opinion doesn't matter. It's more like, hey, this is my opinion, I like to share it. And I guess, you know, you've got the comment section as well. And, you know, you guys can also join in on the DNMs too. But I think that's kind of the cool thing about it. And no, by no means do I feel like I'm super, you know, experienced and know-it-all in relationships. And even like, you know, like me being a decent person, right? Like the thing that immediately popped in my mind, I'm like, well, depending on who you ask. If you ask my ex, I don't know. And I think different people have different perspectives. You know, different people have access to different levels of information.
I mean, like, we're going way off the topic of relationships now, so maybe this is not the topic of this.
We can bring it back, though. We can bring it back.
We'll
bring it back.
With it.
Yeah, let's bring it back. Yeah.
But it just makes me think about the fact that, like, the way that, like, humanity has changed in the past, however long that, like, technology and the internet and stuff has been around. And obviously, this kind of connection, this kind of conversation still happens, but you don't feel it as much anymore. Like, it's not as apparent in humanity. So, like, there's, you know, like social media comes with this pressure to conform, to fit in, to be the same, much more than if you were just like in high school or whatever, right? But it's like every person is so individual. We bring not just different experiences from ourselves, but also different perspectives. Like Jeff is a great person, but like he said, no one is perfect, right? So like there are people out there who might not like him. There are people out there who don't like me. But that doesn't mean I'm a bad person. And if I don't like someone, doesn't mean they're a bad person, right? It's just they're different to me. And not everyone needs to be friends.
You don't have to agree with everyone.
And not everyone has to be like a great person. Some people are just mediocre or they're just bad. And that's okay. Like, you know what I mean? This pressure to have to be a certain way.
Perfect almost, right?
And to be like, oh, well, you know, like they should have known better. Like, should have known by what standards? Like, talking philosophically.
If they should have known better, then they probably wouldn't have done the thing. So it kind of implies that they just didn't know. And the way to know is to have done the thing.
Yeah.
You know, like you learn through trial and error, right?
Yeah. And you also need to let people have error. Like, sometimes people mess up.
Yeah.
And you gotta just let it go because I'm sure you've also messed up.
Yeah, we've all messed up in some way. And I think messing up is more just like we thought outcome A would occur, but actually outcome B occurred. Or like we really want to achieve this particular thing, or our intent behind doing something was A. And then because of things that we didn't consider or we considered but didn't like act upon or whatever other reason, right, it didn't work out. But that's also how learning is done. The whole point of trial and error is you make errors and you learn through the errors.
And it's the same in relationships. You can't jump into a relationship expecting it to be perfect.
Yes.
I don't know how many people out there would agree, but this concept of 80-20, I feel like is so overlooked sometimes, where it's basically this idea, if you don't know, that no one's going to be 100. Like, you can't find someone who fits 100% of everything that you're looking for. Right? Everyone's got like 80% of what you want. And then the 20% kind of don't fit. But all you have to do is figure out, am I okay with the 20 that they don't have? So maybe you meet someone and their 20 is the fact that like they don't want kids. And they spend money frivolously. And that's like a huge no-no for you. So that's not the person for you. But maybe then you meet someone who like, I don't know, eats messy. Like...
that could be a big ick for some people, actually.
Could be a big ick. What's like a low ick?
Doesn't drink tea.
Doesn't drink tea, and maybe like doesn't brush their hair. Because that's just the hairstyle they like. And you're like, look, I don't...
Which is different to not washing their hair.
Different, which also could be okay for some people. But like, that's still 20. Everything else is great. that's still 20 that you don't have, but you're like, look, would I not marry this person because they don't brush their hair and they don't drink tea? Like, I can live with that. That's fine. That's good, right? But then what some people do is they're with someone they're 80, but their 20 is like a non-negotiable. Like it could even be something like having a really good intimate life, and it's just not something that they can give you. But everything else is great. You see people like this all the time being like, you know, you need my love letters. I've been with my boyfriend for so long.
Everything's great, but
I don't know if I'm in love with him anymore. Is it just me? And then they go and find someone who's just the 20. Like it's not even a different 80, just the 20 that they don't have with this person, and then they end up in this like really toxic relationship because they don't have the other 80, like their values and stuff are not aligned, but they were just craving that 20 so bad they'll do anything to get it. Like it's that kind of understanding that you need to get from going into relationships and like being reflective and taking your learnings and going to before you go to the next one. That's like something that maybe some people don't do enough of.
I'm actually really curious, maybe, and I know you're usually the one asking questions, but like I've kind of got a question, like maybe not so much a question, but a point for us to discuss. Perhaps, like I'm really curious about, which is that point of settling, right?
Yes.
like I think like the 80-20 rule, and I think like looking at it from 80% perspective, I think it touches on a broader topic, which is, well, where's the line? How do you know you've settled and not settled, right? And even that 80-20 kind of perspective, right? Like there's 80% of that person is like aligned with you and 20% it isn't. But that 20% is really, really important. So for example, if we listed out 100 traits, like this is just like to highlight the point, right? Not that you should do this in a relationship. Let's say that this person had 100 traits and 80 of them were things that were green ticks for you. And 20 of them were like things that weren't, right? But the 20 that weren't green ticks, massive deal breakers. And the 80 that were kind of like, you know, things that you liked, we're kind of like, yeah, but you didn't like them that much, right? And even in this hypothetical, let's say you went and dated somebody else and really 80% of what they had was like not super compatible with you, like not super what you're looking for, but it's kind of like negligible stuff. And the 20% was like perfect, like green ticks, massive green flags. And that's kind of what you wanted. And you're like, almost like imagine, you know, whatever life that you would want to have long-term in a long-term relationship, either thinking about making decisions together, buying a house together, having a family together, whatever it is your goals are in a long-term relationship, and you're like, I can really imagine myself doing this with this person. I think that's probably still valid to a certain extent. But I guess it's not so much about 80% of the person and 20% of the person. It's, does this relationship overall fulfill you to that extent, to the extent you need to be fulfilled? I've kind of come to realize that sometimes when you have feelings for somebody and it feels that way, it again isn't quite logical. It's not like a checklist thing. You can't really explain it. But it gets to a point where like the things that I thought would matter kind of don't. But the bottom line is, it's almost like I have like two things that need to be present in order for me to be like, this is a go. And it's almost like an equation, right? Like a negative times a positive is still a negative. So you need both positives in this regard. You need both.
Or both negatives.
And both negatives. In which case you should just leave. Like, so the multiplication analogy doesn't work in the case of both negatives.
Just stop there.
If it's both negatives, you should leave. But it's almost like I need both of these things to be met. One is like, think about it using the logical side of my brain. Am I feeling safe in these? And it still leads back to feelings to a certain extent. But is there safety in this relationship? Is there respect? But then just that isn't enough. I think you also need to feel quite strongly. You know, you need to feel like you love this person. You need to feel like you want to be with this person. You want to feel like it's worth the risk. And I think both are important. So for me, I guess the feeling part is probably what takes majority of it, because what's the point of a relationship, right? For me, it's not just so that I can have somebody next to me. It's not to have a companion, right? Loki, the thought that came to my mind is like, Loki, I've got a puppy for that. Like, you know, like, and my partner is not my puppy, you know, like that's not how it works. Like, it's not just companionship, although companionship is a big part of it, right? It's about like supporting each other, being there for each other. That's a big part of it. But it's not just companionship. Like, I don't have to be in a relationship. I think I'm in it because I love this person, because I want to be with this person, because I feel this romantic way around them and I want to act and behave in this particular way, and I really want to be in their presence and build this relationship with them. That's a feeling, a want, a desire. Too many times people are like, oh, but I love him or I love her. and it's like toxic, right?
But daddy, I love you.
Yeah. But and then too many times it's gone the other way around. It's like, oh, but this person has a stable job and they love me and they care about me and they care for me. But deep down you're like feeling really empty.
Yeah.
And I think settling is when you go one or the other, and not settling is when you have both. And I think we should have the right to ask for both. What's your views?
When you are in a relationship, how honest are you with yourself about how happy you are? Settling is really just majorly an issue when your actions don't align with your thoughts and your feelings about how happy you are. So if you're in a relationship where, it's 80-20, but you're not honest with yourself about how much that 20 affects you, then you're settling. So
there's something in this relationship that is deeply important to you, or deeply important to you in a romantic relationship, or an interpersonal relationship, or something that is deeply important in a partner, and it's not present in the relationship, and you perhaps have identified that it's not something that can necessarily be worked on, right? Because not everything can be worked on. Sometimes not everything should be worked on. Some people disagree. They're like, everything can be worked on, and you know what? I think I can see why they have that perspective, because I think as humans, we look at our experiences, try and understand them, and then we go, that's how the world works, period, generally, right? When I hear people go like, but everything can be worked on, I automatically think, yep, in your perspective, because your relationship happened to be a relationship that could be worked on, where everything that needed to get you from where you were to where you are in your relationship just happened to be things that could be worked on. And so the way now you understand the world is everything can be worked on, and we just need to work hard enough. And you kind of generalize it, and we all do that, right? The reason my views are different is exactly the same reason, right? My experiences are different. And I've also experienced like parts of relationships that I'm like, I don't think that should be worked on, because it's not a problem. Like I never saw it as like, this person has a problem they need to fix. It's more like, this is who you are, this is who I am. Like fully accept that this is kind of just like how we interact, or the interaction and relationship that comes out based on our personalities. And maybe this is something's missing, and that's okay. Like even thinking about my ex, like when we broke up, I was so certain that she'd find someone that would just be like, yeah, this is like 100% what I'm after. Because I was able to acknowledge that there's actually nothing wrong that needs to be fixed. It was just simply when we interacted, something was missing. That was really important to me.
If you think about it more deeply, there's two types of settling. There's the settling that people tell you, and there's the settling that you tell yourself. So there's like, maybe you're with family and they're like, oh, you're settling. Like you can do better. And in that instance, it's not as relevant, because oftentimes it's people trying to superimpose their expectations of what your relationship should be like onto you.
Or maybe it's like, for them, it'd be settling if they had this, right? But like everyone needs different things.
It's settling from their perspective. So maybe your parents want you to like marry a doctor and live near them and, have an income of whatever, because that's important to them. But for you, that's the 20, maybe. And so for you, you're not settling, you're happy where you are. The other is when you tell yourself you're settling. So maybe you're with someone and you say, am I settling? Could I do better? I feel like I would be happier if I was in a relationship that was different in XYZ. And in that instance, it comes down to a matter of, if you had to weigh up the cost of leaving this relationship and finding a new one, I mean like going on dates again, being single.
It's not fun.
All that stuff.
It's really not fun.
That cost versus the opportunity cost, I guess, of staying in this relationship and having to live with the thing that you're questioning yourself on. That's the real conversation that a lot of people don't want to have, because it's scary, because it's like,
it's confronting. You got to confront the facts.
Exactly.
And the answer might not be very nice. The answer might lead to a very difficult conversation and you hurting someone that you care very deeply about.
Lots of uncomfortable situations
and that
for you.
Sucks a lot.
Yeah. And it's like, obviously part of growth, but humans try and avoid pain as much as possible. So that 100%. Is the other version of settling, where it's like, it's up to you. You have to.
I think you also made a good point about like the negative connotations around settling. It almost implies that the person wasn't good enough for you, right? And at no point in time did I feel like I wasn't good enough for other people that just didn't want to date me, right? If they did date me, it'd be quote unquote settling for them, right? And at no point in time did I feel like I was better than anybody that I chose to no longer be in a relationship with, or break up with, or stop dating. I really just think it's more around, hey, this is what evolved as a relationship, and these are the core components of the relationship. This is how we're interacting. This is not fulfilling all the needs that I want in what I might need in a romantic partner. In the very same way where like you can be friends with a ton of people, but maybe not want to be in a relationship with them.
Yeah.
And you don't think you're better than your friends though.
Yeah.
You know? Like I think that's probably a great example. I've got a lot of female friends. They probably don't want to be in a relationship with me. I probably don't want to be in a relationship with them romantically. But I don't think at any point in time are we like, oh no, but it's because I'm better than them. You know? I don't think that's kind of
like, I think another way to think about it, like if I use us as an example, we wouldn't date each other.
Yeah.
But if you were to, did you just say fair?
Facts.
If we were to date, obviously we would be unhappy because like we're not compatible.
Yeah, exactly. Romantically.
But it's like, that doesn't mean you're settling. If we were dating, it wouldn't mean we're settling because we're better than the other person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
just like we're just different people.
That's a great example. Like if we were dating, we'd be settling, right?
Yeah. Because
but
that's
like,
what we're looking for.
to the extent where like, I don't think at any point in our friendship was it like, oh, maybe we'd date each other. Like even when we first met,
we were like
almost
bro.
like 10 years ago. And I think that's a great example, right? Like settling in the sense of like settling for the feeling or the lack of feeling, not like this person's by some sort of metric not good enough.
Yeah.
And I think that ties back to like your example around like, oh, if your parents are like, oh, that person's not a doctor or whatever, that's like a metric based thing, right? You're trying to measure them against like this objective metric of goodness. I think different cultures, different backgrounds, different upbringings, different experiences would agree and disagree with this. I just personally think why I want to be in a romantic relationship is largely because of how I feel. And so the settling part isn't this person's not good enough. The settling part is I don't want to settle for a feeling that's less than what I know is possible. And that's it.
I think it's easier for romantics because they're such like feely people, because you hear about people being like, oh, not me. My partner is obsessed with me. We're still just as in love as we were the first day that we met. Blah, blah, blah. All this stuff, right? And some people might see that kind of thing and be like, but I don't feel that with my partner. Am I settling?
Yeah.
And it's like, don't compare what your baseline and your like feeling of love should be to other people's.
100%.
If you feel fine in your relationship, there's no need to be chronically online picking your relationship apart because it doesn't conform. Like I said before, conformity, because it doesn't conform to other people's versions of like good.
100%. How you feel about your partner should evolve over time. What it really boils down to is like, how deeply do you want it? Like, you know, like how deeply do you want to be with this person? It's not like, oh, I need to feel that exact same intensity as I felt in the first month or the first year or the first 2 years, and that needs to be ongoing. And if that ever changes, then I'm settling for the feeling, right?
However, if that is what you're after and you make do with the feeling going away, like if you're like, I want to be in a relationship where it's like the Olympic flame and it never goes out.
And it's never, and you'd rather be single than not have that.
That's the reality of what you have to confront.
Yeah.
If that is your criteria and you're like, I'm with someone I really love, but I feel like the flame has died out, and you're like,
I'd rather be single than not have the flame.
Your options are to be single or to be happy like this.
Or try and like reignite the flame. Sometimes that works.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can reignite the flame.
Yeah, but it's like you have to be okay confronting the idea that like maybe I should just be single.
Yeah.
Like if I'm not happy settling.
Yeah. After my breakup, it was like a relatively long-term relationship. It was like almost 3 years. I think at the time it was like, oh my God. And I think like for a fair bit of time after that relationship, I was like, did I make the right call? Did I make the right decision? Was this the best thing for me? Do I have issues? Do I need to go to therapy? Do I need, like, is it because I have commitment issues? All these different things. Like why did I break up? And you start doubting yourself. And I think with a bit more distance and a bit more hindsight, the trap I've fallen into is like, I have to make the perfect decision about romantic relationships. And I think that adds a lot of pressure, right? I think that's where the confusion lies, where it's like, oh, should I leave my partner? It needs to be a perfect decision. Or like, and then once you've left, it's like, wait, should I have stayed? Because it needs to be the perfect decision. When in reality, it's
trial and error.
It's a bit of trial and error. And I think like, you know, when I first got out of a relationship and for a while after, I'm like, oh, I've screwed myself over. I'll never find, you know, the partner that's right for me. And I've made the biggest mistake of my life and I've completely screwed myself over. And I think that isn't necessarily true, because what I found is like, yeah, I can be single. Like, let's say that did happen and I never find the person right for me. It honestly isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Coming out of a relationship, it was really difficult sometimes to explain to people like why I left, because I would always start with, I have so much respect for my ex. I think she's great. I think she's amazing. And then I think it naturally raises questions.
Like, it's like, dump?
It's like, the fuck, dude? Like, and I think that probably led to a lot of pain from my end as well, because people were like constantly questioning me, and then I started questioning myself. And I think there's almost this notion where like breakups need to be this like flurry, dramatic, like they cheated on me, or like, you know, we just couldn't reconcile an argument, or like we just became different people. And I think my experience was just like, yeah, we did grow and we did become different people. Yeah, I think it was just as simple as I just tried to imagine a life with her. And I think it's really coming to terms with like, this isn't just like, oh, this person will be present in your life. This is the person that you'll raise children with. This is the person that you'll make a lot of big life decisions with. This is the person that, you know, you will really be intertwined with. And you should really, really want that.
Yeah.
It should be something that you really, really want. And I think cutting away all the other stuff around settling, not settling, objective metrics, etc., that's probably the really important question, which is like really reflecting on what is the life that you would imagine with the partner that you want to be with, and can you imagine yourself living that life with this particular person? And it might be because this person is able or not able to give you particular things, or it might just simply boil down to, I don't feel a particular way about this person, therefore I don't feel the desire or even comfortable building this life with this person. You know, you can't really control whether or not you feel a particular way about somebody or not. So you can logically be like, this person is like all these great things and all these great features. Yeah, it's possible that that life could be built with this person, but you don't feel this way about this person, therefore you don't want to. And that's such a big part of it as well. When it all settles, I still want to be with this person in this way. I think that's pretty special.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for today. I can't really tell how much we filmed, but I'm hoping it's a good chunk of content. As always, this will be on all the platforms that you want. If you want it on Spotify, it's there. YouTube is there. Thank you very much to my special guest, Jeff, for coming on today's episode. The next episode, as you probably expect, is going to be a solo cast. So if you have any comments on what we discussed today, or if you have ideas on what you want the next episode to be about, where I just talk for myself, please leave them in the comments. That would be really cool. Or if you're on Spotify, you can come to Instagram or come to the YouTube link and drop me a comment or a message, and that would be fab. Next episode will be in another 2 months, give or take. I'll see you then. But thank you, Jeff, for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. I had a lot of fun.
Yay.
And yeah, thanks for being such a cool host.
Thanks, guys. Bye.